I know you.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to The Kate Daly Show, and please go to katedalyradio.com for the podcasts of this here live show that you're listening to all over the country and on Patriot TV in the evening, and appreciate you listening in, of course. I've got the wonderful Phillip Patrick with me, and I'm so excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kate.
You betcha. Hey, I have questions for you. I have questions for you. All right. So let's talk money. Let's talk where we're at with gold. I know that this is something people should be very interested in getting right now. And of course, the federal government's fiscal year ended September 30th. So we finally got a full accounting. So can you get us up to speed, run through the numbers for us?
Yeah, it's not looking good. I mean, the Biden administration ran up a deficit of over $1.8 trillion for the fiscal year of 2024. That was up 8% from last year, and it's now the third highest deficit on record. The only other years in history with bigger deficits, by the way, was 2020 and 2021 when we were dealing with the black swan COVID pandemic. But, even more concerningly, this deficit came despite record income. We had $4.9 trillion in income. Under Biden, well, last year we saw government debt rise to $35.7 trillion, up $2.3 trillion from the last fiscal year. And most concerningly of all, as a share of the total US economy, the government deficit is nearly double the 50-year historical average. So 2024 numbers are rough, to say the least, Kate.
Wow, a lot of money exchanging hands. So a big part of that growth came from the interest payments on the debt. So how bad is it?
It's pretty bad.
Okay.
Government spent last year alone $1.2 trillion on debt service, right? Debt service payments are now the third largest line item in the federal budget, coming behind Social Security and healthcare. Very concerningly, the government spent 50% more on debt service than we have on defense, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the US is an astronomical defense spender, right? We're the top defense spender in the world. We spend more than the other 24 top defense spenders combined. Just servicing the debt is 50% more than that, right? It's really getting absurd. Now, we're not addressing this, right? Congress suspended the debt ceiling back in June 23 until after January 1st, 25. So after the election, it's going to come up again, and it's going to be more dire because we've amassed more than $4 trillion of debt over and above the old debt ceiling. So it's getting out of hand.
Wow. I'm visiting with Phillip Patrick. We're talking about debt, where we land now that the numbers are finally out. I've asked him to come on to talk about this. It's big news, and there's a lot of hand wringing going on over the growth of federal debt from fiscal conservatives, and the left saying things like it's no big deal, it's just money we owe ourselves. So, does a growing federal debt affect the real economy?
Yeah, it's a good question. And first off, I'd say it's false to call the debt, money we owe ourselves, right? If I were to hit you up for $1,000 loan until payday, and then when payday comes, I tell you, well, that debt doesn't really matter because collectively it's money we owe ourselves. I don't think you're going to be too happy, but it's a similar principle. But, the problem is it does have an effect in the real economy in many ways, right? First, and perhaps most obviously, debt service payments crowd out important spending. Yes. For example, like defense and homeland security. Admiral Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs, said that the most, and this is a direct quote, the most significant threat to our national security is our debt. And it makes sense, right? Because more debt means we're at the mercy of our creditors around the globe. And of course, we have fewer resources to invest in our strength at home. Secondly, and you and I have talked about this before, federal spending competes with private spending, right? Which drives prices up. It's largely why we're seeing the inflation we are. And thirdly, this growing debt just diminishes the economic opportunities available to every American, right? Mm-hmm. Higher interest rates resulting from increased federal borrowing make it harder for families to do things like buy homes or finance car payments. So, it has a huge effect on all of our lives on a daily basis, even though it feels existential at times.
So central bank gold buying has been setting the records for the last 2 years. Why?
Partly for the reasons we've talked about, right? Mm-hmm. Things like inflation will drive the price of commodities up in general, and obviously gold being a commodity, it does the same thing. We've talked in the past about the world running away from the US dollar. Well, that leads to a decline in the value of the dollar, and it drives gold up. And the third reason, I think that the clue was in the question, right? We've been setting records for the last 2.5 years, driven by central banks, but also institutional investors. So demand right now is at all-time high. So it is the perfect storm for growth in safe haven commodities. And that's why we're seeing precious metals, gold and silver, gold specifically, hitting records.
There was an article on Birch Gold that talked about JP Morgan and debasement trade, quote unquote, increasing the gold price. And of course, we're in the early days of record gold prices. I had Gerald Celente on Friday talking about the record. It's going to go so much higher. So now would be a good time to get in to buy gold. But did you want to talk at all about JP Morgan calling the debasement trade?
I mean, that's exactly what it is. And this is the history of currencies, right? We've grown up and our whole life, the dollar has been king, but currencies really never last, right? Currencies, the ones that do last with significant devaluation, but most currencies throughout history will be devalued and will plummet. But we've been debasing currencies forever, right? People think the Roman Empire failed because of war. They did not. They failed because of currency debasement. They didn't have dollars to print because we didn't use paper money, but we had silver coin, right? And they wanted to expand the Roman Empire. Some bright Roman said, well, let's put 10% tin into the silver. 10 became 20, 20, 30. Right. By the end of it, Roman money had very little silver. And anyway, trust in money broke down and trade broke down. This is an age-old story that has been replayed time and time again, and we are hurtling down that same path today.
Yeah, and gold's just going to continue to rise. Make sure and text Birch Gold 989898. Text them my name, Kate. Get the free information packet. You're going to want this information. I would never tell you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. Please go ahead and do that. You're getting this free information that's going to be really, really helpful to you. And I really appreciate you, Phillip Patrick, for coming on and talking about this, because those numbers coming out, it was a big deal. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. As always, my pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. And of course, be faithful, be fearless. See you back here tomorrow. And lots of guests this week. Oh my gosh, so many guests this week. And of course, see you tomorrow. Go to katedalleyradio.com. Thank you so much. You're such a gem. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you for having me. I really enjoy it.
You're a babe. You're a total